All right, thank you. Nice to meet you all. A lot of unfamiliar faces. So I'm Chris, founder and CTO of Exit Games, more well-known recently as Photon. So we are a company from Hamburg and quite famous in the multiplayer space. So I brought with me Erick, who will take over in about, 5 minutes. And I will just do a quick introduction and then we dive deeper into technical stuff. But it won't be too deep, but I think it will be quite interesting. All right, so just quick, so who are we? So we run an infrastructure, so I started the company 2003, so 21 years ago, so there was no iPhone, just Nokia phones out there. And the idea was to connect mobile phones to do multiplayer stuff. So eventually this became quite a big undertaking and business. So we run 20 regions, have almost 1.5 billion monthly active players, have almost 1 million registered accounts, not active accounts, but registrations. Work with a lot of famous companies, so we are quite proud. We are still a relatively small company, so we are like 60-ish people, headquarters in Hamburg, but most of the companies are sitting around the world, which is, I think, quite common these days with a lot of companies. So network multiplayer, so we have very strong focus on real-time multiplayer, and there are four dominant network topologies out there. So no matter if you use our product or open source products or custom built stuff, you usually can cluster it into 4 different ways. So there's dedicated servers, so that's what Fortnite, Apex, all these type of games are using. You run a dedicated server, which is basically the game itself, including the game engine. And you have the games actually connecting. So for every game instance, you have to spin up a dedicated server. Specialized companies doing the orchestration part, like Multiplay or Agonis and whatnot. So we focus on the actual multiplayer part, which you need. Or this is one of our products. So another way to do multiplayer is client-hosted. So you say, I don't want to spin up dedicated servers, it's quite expensive, so it's a co-op game, so you can use one of the clients as a host. So everybody's connecting to a host. So the big disadvantage, obviously, is the host could die for whatever reason, then the game is dead. You have to do a host migration and so on. It's quite popular, nevertheless, on Steam for a lot of games, and it's like super cost efficient, obviously. So another way, what we call shared mode, so it's Unity calls it distributed authority. So you just give authority to the clients, so the server is not authoritative at all. Has a lot of advantages, but a lot of disadvantages because you cannot prevent cheating really, and you don't have the game running on the server. And there's a fourth technique called deterministic, where you run a deterministic simulation. So Erick will talk about that later a bit more. We have 2 products, Fusion and Quantum, which are covering all the 4 segments. I don't go into detail. Here, all our products are for free. We have tons of samples, so you guys can just download the stuff for free, develop for free, and a lot of free tiers as well. So just to give you an idea where we are coming from, so we started with real-time multiplayer about 10 years ago with a technology we called real-time and PUN. And then we released a new version of PUN 2, which is still super popular. We created a product called Bold, which was the first client-server technology really properly for Unity back in the days. we merged that into a product called Fusion, so we are already on the second iteration of Fusion now, and then Quantum is our deterministic product. So, and it never stops. So even we keep innovating, and you will see when Erick talks about it, there's a lot of stuff that can be enhanced all the time. So the new thing we are working on right now is we have been very strong in Unity, and we are going into Unreal Space now, which I think is quite interesting. So I hand over to Erick, and see you later.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you guys for joining us today. And so let's dive into something not necessarily Photon, although can still be applied. So here's our problem. We want to do a multiplayer game. And if you think about the players or as a designer, that's what you want. You have multiple devices. You want your game to feel like a single world that's connected for everybody. So just like magic, like that. And I added here, the Wikipedia definition, but it's kind of like in the recent years, this has been a term that players use normally, but developers also adopted it to define the set of stuff you use to create your multiplayer game. So let's call it netcode. But the point is, there's a technical challenge here. We're mostly developers or designers, and we don't believe in magic. So here's the actual technical problem, and let's say the rough solution. We have a game state, a set of objects or a set of data that we want to keep it in sync on all different devices. So as Chris already teased a bit, there are different approaches that are basically the ways to do this. And common to them is latency. So latency is something that exists. You cannot really get rid of latency. It's because of the speed of light, and it exists. But I'm going to go back to it at some point. Before a bit of detailing a bit more about those 4 different ways of doing things. So you can actually categorize them in 2 different big areas. So one way to keep the game state in sync is to essentially transfer the state. So either with a server or from multiple sources, you transfer directly the data that you're interested in, like positions, health, and so on. And you have these different topologies, 3 in this case, like you have client-server that you can either run the server as a dedicated machine, or you can have one of the players act as a server but also play the game. Or you can just have all the clients, some of them control some objects and so on, and kind of get it to work. Many games are done like this because it is very cost-efficient as well. And the other way is to replicate not the actual game state, but just what the players are doing, just input. And if you can rely on a deterministic implementation of your game simulation, you can actually keep the state in sync all the time. There are fundamentally 2 main ways of doing this. You either have the obsolete GPO P2P version that can only host 2-player games and has rifting all sorts of problems, or you can have a server in the middle managing input, and that's the modern way. It's what we have in our product, and it's what, let's say, a game like Brawlhalla did brilliantly with also an in-house tool in their case. So we have these 2 ways, right? And they match this. So essentially, in blue here, when looking at our products, is transferring the actual game state between the different devices. Whereas in green here, it's like, OK, you can also transfer just the input. Then I did this. And this is kind of a quiz. Anybody recognizes any of these games? I don't expect to, but which one?
I think on the top of the left, this is an VR game, the same like the Rainbow Six Siege. Creatures.
Creatures, that's right. So you got a prize next time. That's absolutely right. But I'm gonna mention. Okay, So this is Breachers. This is done with Fusion, dedicated server. That one is called Windblow by Motion Twin, that sells devs. It's their new game that's built with Quantum. This is Atomic Picnic, also Fusion in player-hosted mode. That is Sunken Land, built in Fusion with shared mode, client authoritative. So I just wanted to use games built with our stuff to demonstrate here. But the point is, when should you use each one of these approaches? So the main thing here is that this is not really your personal choice. To choose between these different topologies or fundamental approaches, basically it's your game that dictates what you have to do, because some of these approaches work better for some games and others for others. But also the platform you are publishing at. So there are cost situations in that running a dedicated server may be prohibitive. So have to have that into account. So essentially, state replication shines, and it's pretty much the solution when you have super high player counts or super big complex worlds, and you're going to go for dedicated server. Maybe there are some co-op games where running client authoritative is fine, because that's also scales fine in terms of costs. When is determinism the right choice? Normally, when you need full state prediction, it's the best way to achieve that if you're doing something like a brawler or fighting Twitchy physics. Or when you have a lot of moving units and you cannot afford to actually transfer the game state because it's too much, like pretty much every single RTS is done with determinism. And sometimes because of the platform, when low bandwidth or extreme low costs are important, like mobile or WebGL, then it's pretty much the best or only choice due to these different reasons. But each one of them has also technical pros and cons. So when you talk about state replication, you gain the advantage of it's possible to do interest management. You can hide information that only some clients can see, some others cannot. You can offload everything that's CPU bound to run, for example, only on a server. Of course, this incurs in costs, but depending on the game, this is the right solution. It's arguably easier to integrate, but there are other considerations there. But then you have either it's higher cost if it's dedicated server. For some games it works, for some it doesn't. Or it's less reliable, like player hosted, and that's why, for example, you don't run mobile games on any of these, except for client authoritative, but because it's cost effective. Then in input replication, the pros are get replays for free. Basically, you can do both kill cam, instant style, or full match replays, and this comes. It's part of also the tooling. We have a team here that uses Quantum that they told us that their whole trailer was done basically by recording replays and then playing the replays again with different cameras and recording the stuff. So, you guys are here, so yeah. You get all that, and it feels like from the developer perspective that there is no net code. You're just writing a local game and it works online. And of course, it's low cost and low bandwidth. But yeah, the devil is in the details. You have cons as well. It becomes CPU bound because everybody's running the simulation. So when it works brilliantly for the cases it does, but it's a small envelope. You're not going to build Fortnite on this. But you're going to build super interesting twitchy games with this, absolutely. And it's also a paradigm shift for the developer. But the thing is, they're all the same. I put that here because that was a different presentation I did at a university where I actually attempted to use set theory to demonstrate that state replication and input replication, they're essentially the same thing. So they're nuancedly different, but mathematically they can be reduced to the same. Essentially, if you think about client server and input replication determinism, essentially, you have your client is sending the input up somewhere to the server. Both do that. Clients are predicting locally. Yeah, both do that. Then when the server sends back compressed state, you roll back to that. Well, if you think that input is the state, then client server and input state also do that, input replication. Then the client has to decode or decompress the state that was received and then resimulate forward again. Do this again. If you consider that your deterministic simulation is your decoding, so the several players' inputs was the actual game state combined with the previous state for you to decode the next state, they're all the same. So yeah, there are nuances on because the cost and technical feasibility and the type of tooling you get, they are different, and this applies. So this is more like a useless exercise in math. But the point I want to get to is that there are fundamental similarities when it comes to the real problem I'm here to talk about, which is about time. So the real challenge when it comes to design multiplayer games is to deal with latency and jitter. Remember, this exists. We cannot just get rid of it. So our job as developers is to hide this, is to create all sorts of good smoke and mirrors and make sure the players feel that the game, that is a multiplayer game, plays as well as a local single-player game. That's what we're trying to do here. So remember, latency always exists. Even on a single-player game, there is latency due to asynchronicity between the input polling. There is latency because of the display you're using, and there is a physics engine and rendering rate differences. So you're always dealing with small latencies and aliasings that technically you use the same stuff we're going to talk about to solve, but it's less noticeable. When it comes to a multiplayer online game, latency is exacerbated. And it comes with the even worse thing called jitter. It comes not only delayed, but it comes in uneven spacing. And you cannot get rid of this. You have to deal with it. Hydraulic press channel, sorry. Insider jokes. So what are the solutions here? We strongly believe that this is it's the responsibility of the netcode to solve this, to help you solve this. If it's our stuff or if it's something you are designing yourself, it is your job to do this. So here are the 3 fundamental techniques you have to use to deal with this. Snapshot interpolation, client-side prediction, and lag compensation. And this is what we're going to talk about now. And interesting, as I said, these all apply to whatever is the technique you're using. It doesn't matter if you're using state transfer or state replication or input replication with determinism. All these apply. So what are each one of them? So let's talk about snapshot interpolation. Remember, our fundamental problem is we are receiving game state either from a server or from confirmed inputs and moving it forward, but that comes with latency and with jitter. How do we get rid of, well, I'm going to try to get rid of the jitter here, not the latency necessarily, but I want it at least to look smooth. So that's what snapshot interpolation solves. Essentially what we do is we receive data, and we're not going to show the data we receive. We're going to add more latency. So this is counterintuitive. So you receive data that's already delayed and it has jitter. How do you fix for it? Well, we fix the jitter by adding more latency. But first thing, do not just do, oh, I have the data, I'm going to lerp towards that. No. That's the key here, and here's a secret. The right way to solve this is the original data that you are receiving has to come with time information somehow, tick-based or time-based. And then you can actually smoothly interpolate between with precise time information, and it would look absolutely flawless. So I have this animated GIFs that I created, and on the bottom there, you can see one that is even using physics. So the red is the jittery confirmed stuff, but there is a smooth interpolation of what you received a bit back into the past. And I have also a slow motion version of it here, so you can see that this one is moving very jittery and in steps, and this one is moving smoothly. It kind of varies from the other one because the other one is jittery, but this one moves at a steady pace behind. Okay, so snapshot interpolation, it does not solve latency, but it solves for the byproduct, which is jitter. Next one. Prediction is interesting because it solves both. With prediction, you are doing the opposite. Instead of receiving the confirmed data and adding more latency, looking things at the past, you are trying to do the opposite. You are basically, you try to extrapolate your simulation forward to make it look, so if you're controlling a character, you want it to move immediately when you do. So we call this client-side prediction, and it's basically you get the data that is jittery and delayed, reset to that, simulate forward again, and new forward simulations to make sure you get both smooth, so it gets rid of the jitter, but also you get rid of the latency because you are making it feel local, making it feel immediate for the player who's doing or experiencing that. So you can do that for both physics, inanimate stuff, or for your character, for shooting. That's pretty much client-side prediction. But then you ask, if client-side prediction fixes both, why don't we use client-side prediction, extrapolation for damn everything? Two reasons. It's difficult to do client-side prediction on everything. For example, for physics, it's very difficult. Very few physics engines are capable of doing actually resetting and rolling back and resimulating all the time. Almost no off-the-shelf engine can do that. But also, there's another reason I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. But, so it does not solve everything, but it is super important because in any game that is fast-paced, you want at least your own controlled object, your own controlled character to use this, because you want it to feel immediate. But without spoiling, there is a reason to keep everything else with the other technique. And then you are talking about some things are predicted and some are not. Then to glue them together, this is just client-side prediction in slow motion. Sorry, it's easy. But okay, to glue these two together, what do we use? It's lag compensation then. So what is lag compensation? So imagine this scenario, which is what I am also illustrating on that small GIF there. So I'm controlling my character, great. It's using client-side prediction, so it feels immediate. I move, I aim. It's all as quick as it can be, designed by the book with a good net code that has time information, does everything precisely. You aim and you shoot. So your shooting is done here with your information here. But what we're seeing, I'm seeing the other characters in the past because they're all snapshot interpolated. And I already said that we're using the two techniques and this one is going to glue things together. So what lag compensation means is I shoot here and I shoot at what I see. But if you think about cheating, making your game feel fair to everyone and not plagued by ill-intentioned players, you want to be able to define if the shot actually happens or not, hit or not, somewhere you trust, either on the server or on the deterministic simulation with the verified, based on everybody's input moving forward of the simulation. So you cannot just trust that, I was seeing and I shot this guy and I got it. So you have a way, you need a way to compute that on a server or on the simulation. This is what lag compensation does. Essentially, I'll say the server here. The server is keeping a history of the game state, or at least partially, of parts of the game state. So when I shoot, let's say at time or tick information 1,000, and I was seeing things at 995, when the server is going to compute tick 1,000, with my input, it knows I was simulating 1,000, but I was seeing things at 995. So the server can, careful, the server does not roll back the game state. That is inefficient. What the server does is the server has a buffered representation, and it can basically query the world. This is typically done on raycasting, on guns and that kind of thing. It can query the game state as I saw it when I did the shooting. So essentially, we're moving the authority for the shot registration to the server, but using the information as I saw it. That's what like compensation pretty much does. But then you ask, why? Again, why don't we just run prediction for everything? And the answer is because it would not be fun for the player. So a 3D shooter is already challenging enough because you have to coordinate movement, either two thumbs or mouse and keyboard, with the aiming. If you are playing against skilled players and they can move freely around, and what you're seeing is a projection of what you think they're going to move towards, and then they actually dodge and move all the time, you would be very frustrated because you think you had him in bullseye and you don't get the shot done. You don't get the head registration. So what we do with lag compensation is cheating. We basically favor the shooter. It is common also to combine, like you use lag compensation for shooting, favoring the shooters, but you let, for example, if the person who is the target put a shield, you use the timed information for the shielding, so you favor the defender on the shielding side of things. So that is why you have to use lag compensation. It's because especially 3D shooters, and that's where lag compensation is actually very, very important. It's on shooters. It's because it feels much better to be able to shoot and hit what you see. So that's why we need all three things together. We need client-side prediction for our own character to feel immediate and feel like a single-player game. We need snapshot interpolation to see a true representation of the other character movement without any jitter, without any teleporting, but it is in the past. And then we'll use lag compensation to glue the two together. But there are cases in which you do not have to use this dual timing thing as well. So I put here two of the games I mentioned before. So Atomic Picnic, which is a co-op PvE shooter, player-hosted, done with Fusion, makes a lot of use of this. It's pretty much designed, it's a shooter, 3D shooter, so it's designed on top of the combination of dual timing and lag compensation for shooting. Whereas you get a game like Windblown by Motion Twin, which is super twitchy and dodgy, fast gameplay, which uses quantum, so it's basically doing prediction of everything. And that's why you need all of these, and when to apply each one, it depends on the case, on each case. And to finish here, this is a summary of what we have in our SDKs regarding this. As I said, everything I talked here is not specific, and it has not been invented by us. So this is what you find in every single good game that has been done in the past that has good netcode. If you think about Valorant, Overwatch, Counter-Strike, Tribes, all these very, very good games, they are basically implemented with these techniques. But now, of course, talking about our stuff, this is fundamentally important for us. It's to make sure that when doing multiplayer, you can have a super twitchy, super smooth presentation of the game to the player who's the judge in the end. And you get these for free. But of course, a lot of people do this ourselves as well. A lot of people, and this is what I wanted to show, is basically, this is what makes good netcode. It's at least it's one, let's say, one point of view for what makes a good netcode. There are other aspects that are equally important. And this is how our SDKs have this. So snapshot interpolation and client-side prediction of what you see, we can do in both, built in into the SDK. Physics prediction in Quantum is built in because it's our own physics engine and we can. So we built it, we designed it for that. For Fusion, we depend on what ships with the Unity or with Unreal, on the Unreal version of Fusion. But there is a recently developed, let's say, or discovered technique that can do a interesting, good enough physics prediction that relies on correcting the forward physics and not really rolling back and resimulating, which is what Quantum can do, but Unity, PhysX, or Unreal Chaos cannot. But there is an approximation that works pretty well, and we have that in Fusion. Like compensation in Fusion is built in Quantum. It's pretty much easy to do, and we have a sample demonstrating how you do it. And that's the end of my presentation. I think I got just 1 minute, and we have time for questions.
Hello. In the Quantum, how does it work with cross-platform determinism?
It is, by design, cross-platform deterministic. So all these titles, when they are not cross-platform, is by developer decision or because it doesn't make sense to add to all platforms. But the way we do it is, it's our engine. We designed it from scratch to be cross-platform deterministic. But I would give you a few details. So we use our own domain-specific language to generate C# code. Essentially, we generate precisely memory-aligned structs. So we use explicitly memory layout everywhere. So even bit by bit, the struct layouts are the same on every platform. We use Q4816 fixed point numbers. But with our optimizations on the lookup tables, variable density, and all shebang you can imagine on the transcendental operations, secret, not so secret, Q4816 because it's the best compromise between accuracy and performance. Don't go 3232, it's too slow. Soft floats, that's a joke. It's too, on the platforms where it doesn't work, it's just impossible to use as slow. So it's pretty much our own fixed point, explicit memory layouts, our own physics engine, our own navigation engine, our own flow fields, our own everything. So we guarantee determinism, cross-platform, proven many times over with many hit titles. So Stumble Guys is every platform you can imagine. All consoles, all mobile, PC, and everything.
Awesome.
Somebody said he would ask a very hairy question, but I think I answered already.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if this is going to be easy to be answered in just this round, but you made an example before about Brawlhalla, about just transporting the input. And right, if I remember that correctly. So the only thing that is synced over the network is the input of the players and not the state of the game.
Yeah.
And for me, how is this synced that you still have the same state on the two clients?
Yeah.
Do you have, like, in the input, do you have also information at what time this input was sent? Or okay, so that is the solution. You have.
It's always about time.
It's always about time. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I have several dead jokes. But yeah, it's all about time. And one important, remember I mentioned, but this is a very, very good question because when I first explained input replication, I mentioned there is this P2P GPO thing that is a thing on emulators and on fighting games. But the problem is that in that tech, if one player stops sending input, the game is dead. Or if they're running at slightly different times, then there is a thing called rifting that happens. I cringe about this because the point is that as soon as you move to server-based input replication, these problems just don't exist. So P2P input replication supports 1v1, 2 players. Do you guess how many players we support with Quantum? 128 in the same game. It's up, I mean, can you have a simulation that runs on the device you want for 128 players? Then we support it. We have mobile games with 32, 40 players, just fine. So, but the important part about what you said is that no player, if you're designing this yourself as well, Brawlhalla does this brilliantly as well, just like we kind of similarly do in Quantum. So one player individually cannot ruin the experience of others because the server never waits forever for the input of any player. The server just replaces the inputs. And there are several little tricks we do, even to make the local extrapolation of the input consistent. So even in the case of one client has a glitch and does not send one particular entry of input in time to the server replaces that for him. But he replaces in a way that, okay, I'm going to guess he used the same input as before. And that means that no buttons are, let's say, unpressed accidentally. Essentially, if you're missing 1 or 2 inputs in between, you are not noticing that the server is actually acting on your behalf. Because on a 60 hertz, 60 ticks per second game, we're talking about super fast stuff here. So it's a game like Windblown. It runs at 60 ticks per second simulation and rollback. So they're probably running 600 hertz. 600 times per second when they're rolling back under medium ping. So, yeah, so if one input is replaced, it would just feel natural. You don't notice that. Unless you log every single stat of what the server does, you don't notice. But yeah, it's basically that. One important trick, you did not ask that, but how do you late join on an input-based game? Because you normally need the input from the beginning to be able to simulate the whole game. So how do I do if I want to late join 5 minutes in? Do I have to simulate 5 minutes worth of play? In that case, we fall back to transferring the full state. But we have that all built in. In our tooling, we have all built in. So support late join, basically one of the bodies is one of the other devices transfers a recent confirmed state, and you get that one and you continue from there with inputs. But yeah, late joins, it can be supported as well.
So in that case, the state is also on the server and...
Not necessarily, but it is an option. So by default, we elect one of the clients that has the best network condition and request a snapshot from that guy. And that's a very good solution for you to launch the game with it, and it's fine. If your game gets super successful, we do fully support running actually the simulation on the server. So the server can be the source of the snapshot, but not only that, the source of the final game result and all that you want. So, but it's totally optional, you don't need to. So snapshots work, late joining with snapshots works transparently, independently if you are running the simulation or not on the server. But it is an optional feature, yeah.
Thanks.
I think we have time for one more, if we have. I think if we don't have any more questions, just thank you so much for coming and for the questions as well.